What's up, everybody? This is Tech G back with another video to help you successfully pass the CompTIA Security Plus certification exam. So let's get into it. In this video, we're going to be talking about a fundamental topic in cybersecurity that you're bound to encounter in both real-world scenarios and the CompTIA Security Plus 701 exam. And this is audits and assessments. So whether you're a security professional or just stepping into this field, understanding the different types of audits and assessments is crucial for ensuring the security and compliance of any organization. So let's begin. All right, so the first thing we have to address is what are audits and assessments? So at their core, audits and assessments are systematic evaluations. They help organizations determine whether their processes, systems, and controls are effective, secure, and compliant with policies, regulations, or best practices. But not all audits and assessments are the same, so we're going to go ahead and break down their types and their purposes. All right, so first let's talk about attestation. So attestation, this refers to the formal declaration that certain controls, processes, or systems meet specified criteria. It is often tied to standards like SOC 2, which stands for Service Organization Control 2, where an independent third party evaluates and attests to the effectiveness of an organization's controls. So for example, you can build trust with stakeholders by proving compliance. And as a use case, a cloud service provider might seek a SOC 2 attestation to reassure customers about their data security practices. All right, next we have internal audits, and these are performed within the organization to evaluate its systems and controls. So let's look at some of the key categories. The first one is a compliance audit, and its purpose is to verify adherence to laws, regulations, and internal policies. And an example would be ensuring GDPR compliance for organizations handling European Union customer data. Then we have audit committees, and the purpose here is it provides oversight and ensures the organization's financial and operational controls are effective. An example of this will be boards of directors that often have audit committees reviewing internal and external audit results. And then we have self-assessments, and the purpose here, this enables teams or departments to evaluate their compliance and operational effectiveness before an official audit. An example here will be a cybersecurity team that might perform a self-assessment on incident response plans to identify gaps. So why are internal audits important? Well, they allow organizations to proactively identify weaknesses before external parties or attackers do. All right, next we have what are called external audits, and they involve independent entities assessing the organization. And these could be regulatory or conducted by third-party auditors. And here are some variations. So we have regulatory audits, and their purpose, they ensure compliance with laws and industry standards. So an example of this will be a HIPAA audit for healthcare organizations that manage patient data. Then we have examinations, and the purpose here, they validate specific controls or processes as per regulatory or contractual requirements. An example of this will be reviewing encryption methods for compliance with PCI DSS standards for payment card data. And then we have assessments, and the purpose here, it identifies vulnerabilities, evaluates risk, and provides recommendations for improvements. An example of this will be conducting a data privacy assessment to ensure compliance with privacy regulations. All right, so next up is independent third-party audits. So these audits, they provide an unbiased evaluation of an organization's controls and processes. And the purpose here is they validate an organization's compliance, effectiveness, and risk management. So an example of this will be hiring a third-party firm to conduct the cybersecurity audit for ISO 27001 certification. And exactly why is this valuable? Well, third-party audits, they bring credibility and often satisfy customer or regulatory demands. All right, so let's move on to penetration testing, which is also known as pen testing. And this is a critical type of assessment designed to identify vulnerabilities before attackers do, and it simulates real-world attacks to test the effectiveness of an organization's defenses. And here are some of the types of penetration testing. The first one we have is called a physical penetration test, and this tests the physical security of facilities. So as an example, this could be an attempt to bypass physical locks or access controls tools to enter a data center. Then we have what is called offensive penetration testing, and this simulates a real attacker's approach to compromise systems. An example of this would be exploiting the software vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access. Then we have what is called defensive penetration testing, and this evaluates the effectiveness of defensive measures during an attack. An example of this would be testing how well an intrusion detection system flags unauthorized activities. And then we have what is called an integrated penetration test, and this combines offensive and defensive strategies. So an example of this will be simultaneously testing how an organization's blue and red teams perform. And also, here are some environments for penetration testing. The first one we have is called a known environment. And this is a test with full knowledge of the system's design and architecture. So an example of this will be white box testing, where testers have source code access. Then we have what is called a partially known environment. And this simulates an insider threat with limited knowledge. An example of this is called a gray box test, where testers know some but not all system details. And then we have what is called an unknown environment, and this mimics a real-world external attack with no prior knowledge. An example of this is called a black box test, where testers rely on reconnaissance to uncover vulnerabilities. All right, next up, we have what is called reconnaissance, and this is the first phase of a penetration test focused on gathering information about the target. And we have what is called passive reconnaissance, and this is where you collect data without interacting with the target. And examples of this, you could be reviewing public websites, social media, or the who is information. Then we have what is called active reconnaissance. This is where you interact with the target to gather information. An example of this could be using tools like Nmap to scan open ports on a server. So why is reconnaissance important? Well, it lays the foundation for identifying potential vulnerabilities. So let's go ahead and bring all of this information together. So audits and assessments, including penetration testing, they play a pivotal role in maintaining an organization's security posture. They ensure compliance, identify vulnerabilities, and provide actionable insights for improvement. And the key takeaways are as follows. So internal audits, they help organizations proactively address weaknesses. External audits and third-party evaluations, they add credibility and ensure compliance. Penetration testing, this mimics real-world attacks to identify vulnerabilities. And reconnaissance, both passive and active, both are essential for effective penetration testing. So in conclusion, understanding the types and purposes of audits and assessments equips you to better protect and manage organizational assets. And not only is this knowledge crucial for the CompTIA Security Plus exam, but it is also invaluable for your career in cybersecurity. So with all of that being said, let's do some check on learning. So the first question is, which of the following is an internal audit typically conducted by an organization to assess compliance with its own policies and regulations? Would this be penetration testing? Would this be independent third-party audits? Would this be a self-assessment? Or would this be regulatory examinations? And the correct answer is this will be a self-assessment. So self-assessments, these are internal audits conducted by an organization to evaluate its compliance with policies, procedures, or regulations. These are often less formal than external audits and serve as a proactive measure to identify gaps before regulatory inspections. Next question, what is the primary purpose of a penetration test in a known environment? Is it to assess physical security through reconnaissance and intrusion attempts? Is it to test vulnerabilities with full knowledge of the system architecture? Is it to perform an independent examination of organizational compliance? Or is it to evaluate the effectiveness of external defensive measures? And the correct answer is it is to test vulnerabilities with full knowledge of the system architecture. So in a known environment penetration test, the tester has full knowledge of the system, such as network diagrams or credentials. This approach is used to simulate an attack with insider knowledge, helping to identify vulnerabilities that may not be obvious in other testing scenarios. And our final question, what is the primary purpose of an independent third-party audit? Is it to ensure that all employees comply with internal policies? Is it to validate compliance and provide an unbiased review of controls? Is it to identify vulnerabilities through active reconnaissance? Or is it to meet legal and regulatory examination requirements? The correct answer is it is to validate compliance and provide an unbiased review of controls. So, an independent third party audit is conducted by external professionals to assess an organization's controls, compliance, and processes objectively. This helps organizations build trust with stakeholders and meet regulatory or contractual requirements.